Hello everyone and welcome to the Voice of Terminus show. I'm joined by Lex. Say hello, Lex.
Hello, that's it, we're done, cut it, we'll go home, bye, see ya. I'm out.
And we have the wonderful Shy in the background with us. Say hello, Shy.
Hello.
Shy, as usual, will be grabbing questions throughout the show for us to go through, ideas, thoughts, whatever you have, as we go through the show to talk about towards the end. Josh ain't with us this time around. He's actually on holiday.
I hate him.
He's actually in the lovely Italy right now, getting himself a nice tan. So, Josh, if you're out there watching...
He's not watching.
Anyway, before we kick off today's topic, which is going to be on the Monk, we have an announcement to make from Pantheon Radio. The April competition has just gone live on Pantheon Radio. Basgrin recently spilled the beans, well, basically yesterday, on bards somewhat. And that being a hot topic, Pantheon Radio needs a bard spoof. Funny commercial, 150 words max is what you can write up. And you can enter at pantheonradio.com/compo. The winner of the Fat Loot will win a Pantheon Radio heat-changing mug and a Pantheon Watchers pledge, which they can keep or give away to a friend. And their script will be made into a voiced-over commercial with music and effects. The rules for this, pretty simple. You have to be over the age of 16, have followed Pantheon Radio and the Voice of Terminus on Twitter. Submissions received before the closing date of the 6th of May at 11:59 PM Eastern Time. So there you have it. There's a competition going on Pantheon Radio. And we thank them for reaching out with us and getting together for this one. So yeah, I'm going to be watching closely to see what those bard spoofs are going to be like.
Yep, and if you haven't gone to pantheonradio.com, I highly suggest that you do.
Yep.
I go to there when I'm coding. I listen to the music. I listen to all the stuff on there. And I will definitely tell you, the Ogre and Scar station rocks. pretty freaking good, man. I mean, it's still a little lighter for my taste, but I mean, it's still some good stuff.
Yep, definitely. So, actually, we have some beans to spill as well. There's been a new class that's been revealed, and we have it. Where did I have it? Lex, where did I put it? I don't know.
Asking me is like asking a toothpick.
Let's go and get this. Let's go and get this image for you guys. So we have a announcement. The Claroid will be introduced to Pantheon. It's
Sounds
an
like
awesome.
something you need a cream for.
It's an awesome class. It's a healer and support with heavy plate armor and leather woven boots. It's definitely something to be fearful of in Pantheon. Forgotten over the time, shrouded in mystery, a new force steps out from the mist. One
Should
whose
still be
bark
forgotten.
radiance from the heavens. They set forth into Terminus to unentangle the weeds of their world. So there you have it. That's the Claroid. And
For those of you that don't realize it, this is kind of like the April Fool's joke that you missed out on.
Yep. So don't take that seriously. But I do like the Claroid.
Don't worry, I don't take anything but Scar Direlord seriously.
Right. So anyway, we're going to talk about the Monk today. In this discussion, and have a look at some of the possibilities of how to possibly maybe subclass this class, and look at the archetype and whatnot. So I'm going to read the Pantheon description to give us a brief introduction into what VR's vision is. Through long-standing discipline and unwavering obedience to ancient teachings, the monk wields their mind and body as a devastating, holistic weapon against their enemies. That's the brief introduction into the monks. Lex, you had some points put in there as well, correct? And we'll look at those first, shall we?
Say, did I? I don't think I did. I think that's all Josh.
That's all Josh, is it? Okay.
I think that is all Josh.
So, explain to everybody out there before we kick into our speculation, and obviously from what we've seen in the VR footage, Lex, give us a brief introduction into the monk from the EQ times.
Well, basically, your monk from EverQuest was kind of a highly utility DPSer, well, melee DPSer. They're light armored, usually in leather or cloth, depending on, you know, what your preference was, because weight was a big factor for monks in early EQ. They were very good with blunt style weapons, be it one hand or two hand. They were really good with hand to hand, to the point where their normal fists were considered magical weapons, which was freaking amazing. They tend to be a little bit more of an acrobatic style combat. So you'll get, like, you know, spin kicks. Please, love of God, I'd like to see a flip or two. But yeah, that's kind of what we had. And when I say acrobatic from when we had, the fact that your character was spinning, doing like a roundhouse kick, that was fancy.
Yeah.
I don't remember if Vanguard had anything like a monk. I was always a plate wearer, so I don't remember. I'm going to say no.
What was the disciple? Didn't they have the disciple?
They had a disciple. I don't remember what kind of class it was, though, to be honest.
Yeah. That's what I would basically, you know, label it in. Anyway,
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be honest here. The monk has never really been my cup of tea. Mostly because I'm always the plate wearer. I'm always the guy carrying. You know, I'm always over encumbered because I carry everything in their grandfather and their kitchen sink as well in my backpack.
Yep.
I can't do that as a monk. So
traditionally, monks basically are used for off-tanking or pulling, in some cases for DPS, and that's what we've been introduced to over the years. You know, going from EverQuest to EverQuest 2, and so forth. We've seen some combat from the monk in the VR streams of Co-Carnage. I think the first showing was in the Tower of the Reckless Magician. If you remember that stream, Lex, can you give us a brief oversight of what we witnessed there?
Well, we kind of witnessed what you would expect from, like, I'm going to say the next evolution of an EverQuest style game. I mean, they were, in that stream, it was hand-to-hand combat. I'm sure they'll be able to wield weapons. We just don't know what kind of weapons. Yeah. They did have roundhouse kicks. They had fancy attacks that kind of had their arms going in a little bit of a blur. So they were, you know, kind of really what I would have come to expect, being an old EverQuester.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go and have a look at the actual discussion here, subclassing for this monk. And Josh has provided us with some really thoughtful ideas on this. And the way this subclass will sound to many of you is different, but I find that actually very refreshing, the approach that he's taken here. Because
we should drop that disclaimer we did last show too.
Yeah, so basically, we're not suggesting that these be put into the game, or that they will even be put into the game. We're just looking at the way archetyping and subclassing has been done in the past. And to be honest with you, we're kind of, you know, full. We just can't deal with it anymore. There's nothing has been modernized or updated or revolutionized in the way we subclass or archetype anymore. It's the same old throughout the games. And what we're doing here is just spitballing some ideas on what could be possibly done. And if there is a team to basically pull this off, it would be Pantheon. That's why we're doing these shows. Theory crafting on archetyping and subclassing. And we do know from Visionary Realms past streams with Co-Carnage and Jim Lee, they mentioned that subclassing is going to have a kind of softer touch. So we can expect a huge difference here from what we're talking about. But maybe some of these ideas might spark something that helps them along, or helps everybody along with some new ideas on the forums and everything. So that's what we're here for. We're not saying necessarily this is something that we want to see in the game. By all means, that's not the case here. So just bear with us. We're just trying to spitball some ideas here and keep you guys entertained while we wait for Alpha to come along.
Just a good old conversation going with a lot of what ifs.
So back on track. The approach that Josh has taken here kind of feels like factions, or
almost like a sub-faction.
Yeah, like a sub-faction that you would take. So what different types of subclass could you have here? You can have the Monks of Rainfall, or the Monks of King Reach, the Order of the Silent Sanctum, Burning Sanctum Disciples, the Followers of Azaris, Shadows of the Dead Vault. Those are just some of those that he's put out there. I really do like the thought behind this, because what we would love to see, like we talked about on the very first show that we did, and the previous ones as well on the on this topic, is not each archetype and subclass for all the different classes out there has to have the same approach. Taking different approaches to each class. One where you might be able to keep your archetype, one where you might have to definitely choose a subclass, is just one prime example of how to do this. And now you've got this one with the monks, where you have maybe factions that determine how your subclass will play.
Yeah, it almost feels like it would be, depending on what subclass you would choose, your character would join a different order. And you would obviously have like faction hits or whatever for, that order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's got the weapons, but we'll go into that in a bit. We'll have a look at the we'll have a look at what he's written down for the first two subclasses. So Monks of Rainfall, Monks of King's Reach. Commonly found in most parts of the world, these monks live in monasteries dotted around the lands. Years of honed skills prepare the monks for their ultimate goal: to rid the world of the 7 great dragons. Where the dragons are, no one knows, but ancient scrolls whisper breadcrumb trails, driving the monks on an adventure to glory. High agility and strength, can use martial weapons in combat. Cloth armor with an assortment of weapons on the belt, minimal armor as they rely on quickness of movement to evade. So
it really comes off. Well, I love the lore aspect,
mm-hmm.
Which is something that some games don't really do. When you go to like say the next step for your class and you become something a little more refined, it's not always tied into lore or tied in well.
Yeah,
and that's one thing that I feel should really be improved. But the description of this particular example of a subclass, it really feels like it would be an off tank. You want, I know people are going to find that a little counterintuitive, where it's like you wear cloth armor, but you're an off tank. It's like, well, it would make sense that having lighter armor would make you more agile, more nimble.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was something to that subclass that said, as long as you're wearing light armor, it could even be a passive. Every piece of light armor you wear gives you plus 1% or whatever to dodge, as an example. Mm-hmm. Say you've got 12 slots for equipment, so that's 12% chance to dodge. That's still not a crazy amount that's going to really take you far. Like, you're not going to be tanking no raid bosses with that thing. But that 12% will take you just far enough to where you versus the next monk, who might be a DPS style, there's going to be an obvious difference there.
And it's not just that as well, looking at the groups, having that tank that has that 12% chance, let's say for instance, for whatever reason, the main tank nips it, falls down, he's no longer there. It does happen. He could come in and take a punch or two, while the group resituates themselves, gets the tank back up, and figures out what the hell is going on. So there's that aspect to it as well, and it would be refreshing to see something like that happen. where you have these different situations where no matter what subclass you take, you bring something to the table. And depending on what kind of group setup you've got, because we're all about challenge here. They want to bring challenge to the game, bring challenge back to MMOs. And this is possibly one great way to do that, is with looking at different ways to offer that challenge. Not just based on NPCs' hit points and whatnot. So... Let's go in. Or do you want to add anything to it?
Well, the nice thing about, in EverQuest, I was a main tank. I used to roll with an off tank sometimes. And people used to think I was crazy. It's like, oh, well, if you're doing your job, you're never going to need them.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, we actually had it down with this group of people that I was very familiar with, to where when something would get down to a certain percentage, our puller would go grab another one. Mind you, for those who don't know, EverQuest was very much a camp style game. They go pull another one, and I would tank that while the off tank tanked the one that's almost dead, because he can still take a hit or two. It's fun, and we kept experience rolling really, really fast that way. And with Pantheon, I hope that we do have the ability to mix groups up a little more than how it's been, simply because it makes you think of more interesting ways to play.
Yeah. And just to add on that as well, because you just mentioned interesting ways to play, this also, looking at it from this type, this viewpoint, the archetype and subclass discussions that we're doing here, this also adds a time sink for VR to work on important stuff, to work on the balancing of certain other classes, and not necessarily make a mock-up of things, because you're never going to have that determined, this is the best monk, or this is the best, subclass to pick, because there's, they're not all the same. They're not all going to be approached the same. Every time you log into a character or create a character, your story and your adventure is going to be different. How you go about it. It's the same with these monks. Each monk coming from maybe a different faction or different order. I can even see maybe having evil monks with this type of subclass situation, where you have evil, neutral, good monks, and you could have you could even expand and broaden little short stories there, even adventure packs that kind of touch on the different types of monks and why this infringement between them is happening. And it adds a time sink again for the devs to not necessarily push out an update or a expansion for the sake of it, because hey, guess what, it's been 2 years now, we need to push something out. They can push something like this out along the side, and that will keep us occupied for those that are interested in that.
Right. When you take a subclass where you take your personal class that you're playing, you take it and he branches out, he has to make a decision. It's fine if they're all on the same team and they're all, prancing hand in hand through the daisy field. That's fine.
Yeah.
But there's not really a lot you can do with that, in terms of a story. But if you make it a choice between good, evil, neutral, whatever, there's room there to where you can actually create a sub-story that, say, the good monks are having a war with the bad monks for whatever reason. There's more just content that you have, or more opportunities you have to work with here.
Because has that even been done before? Looking at it from the lore perspective, we know that you have your game lore, you have your lore on the dragons and whatnot, the world. You have your lore on the races, but have we actually seen or had games where they actually go in depth into the class lore?
I'm thinking, my memory's not the greatest, and I've played so many MMOs where they all kind of meld together at some point, but nothing's really coming to mind. There might, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here and say there might be one or two.
Yeah, because that's another aspect that you can always look at as well. I know an MMO is for everybody. There's a lot of people playing. Everybody has their flavor, their preferred choice of class and race and whatnot. But doing something like this, and especially looking at the monks, the way Josh has set this one up, I would actually find that very refreshing. If some, if we had some class lore, and again, looking at the team to do this, if we look at the lore from Pantheon so far, what's out there, and some of the videos that have been put out from the community themselves as well, it's very interesting and very well thought out, the lore behind all of this. Every little detail in the game that you see on the streams has meaning.
Right.
The way the trees have been put down, the way the buildings have been set up, the way the area is designed, everything has meaning, and it's down to the smallest part of the lore. Right.
Well, it's like, and this is a lot of work for a developer to do something like that, right? But the thing is that they don't realize that you don't really have to do anything like that for every single class.
Nope.
It doesn't make sense for a paladin to have an evil choice. Because if you want to roll an evil paladin, you're going to roll a dire lord, or shadow knight, or whatever the game gives you. Because if they have that, they have the other usually. And on the same spectrum, if I'm a dire lord, personally, I would enjoy the option to go somewhat good, in a way, but that's not my character, and it really wouldn't make sense, especially for a scar, right? So,
you and your scar.
I know, but at least I can accept it because it makes sense that a scar would likely never be good.
Yeah.
Let alone a scar dire lord.
Let's just go and look at the Order of the Silent Sanctum, because we kind of sidetracked here a bit and got a bit more into other topics there.
If you've made it through over 100 of our shows, you probably figured out we go on tangents.
Yep. So, the Order of the Silent Sanctum. Monks, having gained the necessary experience, travel to the Silent Sanctum to test their skills to see if they are worthy to join. The Order of the Silent Sanctum, blindfolded and placed in a small box, the initiate must not utter a sound. The box bakes in the sun during the day and freezes during the cloudless nights. On the final day, snakes are thrown into the box, and if the monk does not utter anything, the final test is theirs. It is simple. Put the petals off a flower without touching it. Very few have their sanity to even see the flower. I love what he's come up with here, and it's wow. I'm stoked, Josh. Brilliant, man. So
that's honestly that's like something you would see in a martial arts movie. Right? At least that's how it comes off to me, and it's just like, whoa, I won't do that because that's a little intense for me.
So, what would be the aspects of this type of subclass monk? Physically weaker than the standard melee monk, they use psionic energy to weaken and stun their foes before they get into fighting range. Use their mental strength to enhance their resistances and fortitude. Bare-chested with scar-like symbols etched over the body, a painted eye is emblazoned on their forehead to enhance their appearance. Shimmering plates float around their bodies, moving instinctively should physical danger present itself. And again,
I love it.
It's
to me that screams melee, but enhanced by magic. But it's not magic; it's psionic. Which is basically mind powers.
And it kind of works well with the previous idea as well. Those are choices that are going to be hard to make, and it's most probably one of those choices where you look back. If we go through all these classes, I'm sure right at the end they're all going to be able to kind of melt together and feel connected in some way, making the choice not easy, but they still all hold, they coexist with each other, and
they have their own
Usefulness.
Own useless, own uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could see this kind of almost psionic monk, where it's like he's still a physical melee DPSer, but he's less like maybe he can utilize caster stats. So now he can wear caster gear, and it still benefits as if it were strength, stamina, dex, whatever, right? It also screams like maybe it could give him slightly additional range. Maybe he hits less, but maybe he has a better range, so he can kind of stay out of danger a little bit. I mean, we're not talking like a ranger with a bow here. We're talking like maybe he's got like 4 or 5 steps back further. So like maybe a 2 body lengths back he can go versus a regular standard stay up in your face monk. You know, when you go to raid and stuff like that, that little bit of space can actually account for a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, it can keep you out of cleaves, stuff like that, and you know, well, maybe just as an example, maybe the regular monks and rogues have to run out of range when he's about to do an ability. That monk doesn't. He can just stand there because he's just far enough away to where it will not hit him.
Yeah. So we'll carry on with the next one, and we'll go through these, and then we'll look at some of the aspects, because he's done a lot of work to this one. So, Burning Sanctum Disciples. Monks wishing to be Burning Sanctum Disciples need to show the fortitude needed to control their elements. Each element is a test. An icy waterfall, a chamber of fire, molten stone and glacial winds are indicators of the monk's mettle. Should the monk survive the elements, 4 crystals are needed from the Nexus caverns. Should the monk be able to retrieve the crystals from the Nexus Guardians, the monk has to survive the embedding of the crystals into the body. Should the monk survive this process, he is welcomed into the Burning Sanctum as a new disciple. Again, very well thought out, and when I
completely unique again.
When I hear this just screams to me Archetype.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like something right up their alley, right?
Yeah. And again, that's another way another route you could take possibly with this type of subclassing for a change, where maybe only certain subclasses are available to certain races, and I would be perfectly down with that. I don't have to see every subclass or every class that I can have available to me. The subclass is available to every single race. I can pick the archetype, but I might be limited on my subclass choices further down the road. And I think that would be a refreshing joy
it would be interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one more thing to mix it up.
Yep.
And let's face it, in terms of even just overabundance of lore and how they've done it in movies, a monk is a very flexible style of character. I mean, you've seen them in movies where they're running through the treetops, they're jumping off of water, a la Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or just incredibly badass. Like I know it's a cheesy movie, but I still like it. Bulletproof Monk.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and like this Burning Sanctum Disciple, that almost sounds like it could be a caster, but. Here's the thing, if you add different animations to where it looks more physical, like say he does a spin and all of a sudden it kind of punches the air and sends a bolt of fire. Granted, it's still a caster. Maybe he can wear leather. And he looks unique doing what he does. And honestly, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would enjoy it.
You could even, look at it from the melee perspective as well. It could be melee. These crystals that get embodied give him maybe a hardened resistance towards certain elements, making him what's that beast from Fantastic Four, the one out of stone?
Oh, the Thing?
Yeah, the Thing. So he's got like this
element. That thing.
That thing, he's got that crystal inside him that maybe gives him a resistance to, or makes him have a rock skin or something like that.
Right. And now I know a lot of people don't like it because I'm definitely not a fan of it. But stance dancing, it was very popular in WoW, especially during Burning Crusade. where you basically change your stance, which gives you benefits and drawbacks. Maybe this could be a subclass that is basically made for the people who who enjoy the stance, which is cool. I know people who love it and absolutely love it. I can't freaking stand it.
And it's one of those things that, you know, we limit to the subclass. So it's not everything or something that everybody can endure and do, because like Lex said, I'm not a big fan of it. But for this type, you know, for the Burning Sanctum Disciples, I could see that working well. And again, that's another new feature that you could add to the subclasses, where one might have this stance, where, you know, hey, I'm made out of rock. I'm now in molten. I've now got a molten rock thingy lava going through me.
That would come off to me as a very, very skill based class, where if you're a very, very skilled player, you could do exceptionally well. But if maybe you're not the greatest at the kind of like stances, I know I'm terrible at it. I'm obviously not going to be very good unless I practice and get better.
And this could also be one of those classes where maybe the stance dancing is the main aspect of how he's played. He might not be so much on the damage and on the DPS and everything, but through his stance dancing, he can counteract DPS coming in for him and the group. So his skill would be put down to being able to switch at the right time to the right stance, you know, to counteract the ability or the spell thrown at him or at the group. That's where he, you know, so it's kind of like a utility.
It really comes off to me as like one of those very broadly proficient classes, you know. Maybe he can swap between, you know, his earth and fire stance, and now he's an off tank, but can still do respectable damage. And then he can go to like another, like ice and whatever, and go back into maybe some kind of debuffs or something. I mean, really, sky's the limit on this one.
Yeah, it's basically, like you just mentioned, he could, you know, have that ability to the tank's falling down again. He now turns himself to a rock-embodied monk. So now he can also take a very hard punch. He can't deal out any damage or anything like that. But
maybe he could trade offense for mitigation.
Yeah. So that's kind of something where the abilities come into play, and that's where I see this being a very useful utility class. Yeah.
It sounds like one that it would be very intimidating to try if it were skill-based. But it would certainly be one that I would eventually try. It kind of a crapshoot to if I stick with it or not, though, because I'm not even gonna, you know, joke or kid myself here. I'm stuck in my ways. You know, I believe in a very balanced tank, and that's just what I do.
That's why I'm here. I'm the crazy one. I'm the one who's I'm the one with the more open, fluent, mellow mind. So let me go and read off.
He is like what?
I'm going to read off what would make this subclass different to the others. So using chi to manipulate matter around them and part of their bodies, stone skin and ice breath are just to name some abilities. Minimal cloth armor, as the skin of this monk ripples between rock-like appearances and crackling. Ever-shifting ice over their bodies, bits of jutting ice and rock extend naturally from their elbows and knees, and magical crystals are embedded in strategic parts of their body. And that's basically just what we were talking about.
Instead of being like turning yourself into basically like the Thing from the Fantastic Four, maybe you go into your little earth stance and you get this like rock plate over your chest, maybe some rock spikes at your shoulders, maybe a little bit over your legs, just in spots, enough to where it doesn't look like it would be. Are you okay?
I just had a thought here with what Josh.
He's thinking of, oh god, who was it that played the Thing? Michael Chiklis?
No, I just thought about what Josh just wrote there, and you in your adamant for Scar. Picture the Archetype, and you have a lookalike contest. Who can look closest to the scar with having those crystals and rocks extending out their body?
Well, here's another thing. If there was a scarred monk that was a, what was it called, burning sanctum disciple, would that enhance the spikes or would that add more spikes?
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, that's the fun thing about these little like what if shows. You can really have some fun with them.
Definitely. So let's go move on to the followers of Azeris. Monks believe their fighting is a mean to an end, but not the only way. This is what the followers of Azeris strive for, and they welcome any new initiate into their ranks. Chi is the lifeblood of the monk, and through this power, the monk. Teachings show that the body's energy is powerful enough to close wounds and even regrow limbs. Very few monks leave the followers' ranks, but if they do it with the purpose to heal where possible and spread the message of Azeris to all who will listen. And for me, this is where I see the monks being closest to, because if we look at a monk, it's a lifelong journey.
Right.
Look at the monks of Tibet and all over the world. They trained for many years. They live in silence. They don't speak a word. They train to have body and soul.
Yeah. Different sects do different things. We understand this. Just go with it.
And kind of have a complete control over their emotions and their rage, and they're all about not doing any harm, and if they have to do harm, it's, you know, with minimal force. And this is kind of where I see this kind of going. And with what he's put out here, this goes to a lot of CC and healing.
Right. And it's interesting because with monks, you do almost have that magical energy that you would see behind your typical caster, you know, chi. And it would make sense that they would learn to harness it in a fantasy world. So the fact that you could turn a monk, which people think is a melee character, possibly into some sort of healer, my thought is, as long as you make the mechanics interesting and different, go for it.
This is what's probably one of the most toughest classes from the idea to implement into a game like Pantheon, with the way that game is played, being targeted based. If this were action combat, I could see this working really well.
Right.
But a way to implement this in a game like Pantheon, this would most probably be one of the most hardest challenges to actually pull off, where it makes sense and feels
like it belongs.
Like it belongs there, yeah. So let me go and read off the abilities, and then we'll go into more of this. Eye deflection, avoidance, and healing techniques. Energy flowing through their hands can create barriers of protection around them. Their bodies are lithe and agile. Sinew and bits of muscle cover the body. Their body seems to shift ever so slightly if you stare too long at it.
It's not what I pictured. Oh, oops, my cam went crazy.
No worries.
Back again. Hopefully I didn't miss up anything. It's honestly, the description is almost a 180 to what I kind of envisioned. Because I kind of envisioned like the monk in a flowing robe, doesn't want to wield weapons, but maybe they can get some kind of like gloves that have focus things, to have something to help them focus their chi. And from there, maybe they can do a lot of short duration buffs, maybe do a lot of heal over times. Stuff like it's a heal over time, but it also increases your target's dodge or something of that effect. And that way, while maybe their heals won't be as powerful as, say, a druid or a cleric, they're still viable because you're adding that short duration mitigation or avoidance boost to it. And it helps the smaller heal make up the ground.
I would even go a different route with the monk here. From the first description, what you said, high deflection, avoidance, and healing techniques. You know, energy flowing through their hands to create barriers of protection around them. I can actually see a way this could work. This would come into some kind of combo system, where basically during the fight, with their deflection and avoidance that they would have to have a certain number of combinations of deflection and avoidance that they reach, thus giving them a buff or an ability to cast a barrier of protection either around them or the group, rather than having the ability to actually heal somebody.
Right.
So it's again a utility healer. This is one that would put down a barrier rather than heal somebody. So he would put down a magical wall of sorts, or a blockade of sorts, around the individual or himself maybe, or the group. And that's how I could see this one maybe working. And it would definitely make for an interesting play style.
Yeah, it would certainly be quite unique, I feel. Because, I mean, you could even go as far as to say they don't use their chi to heal, but they rather use their chi to manipulate yours. So, I mean, that's like a whole other... I know it's technically the same thing as magic and such, and heals, whatever, but it's the wording and the thought process behind it that makes it feel different. You know, so now you don't feel like you're actually using magic. Like, oh, you heal. You're using the energies of your body to manipulate your targets so that they benefit from like power they don't even know they have. You know, and that's like,
it's definitely. This is also a very limited class or subclass that you would have. At least from my viewpoint at the moment, because when I see the barriers of protection around them, this screams basically a utility to the cleric, where this type of monk would definitely benefit any cleric in the group. Maybe he adds to that barrier that we know the cleric's going to have, where he puts down those shields. Maybe that's something where the cleric and this particular type of subclass monk work very well together.
Yeah, I mean, you could make that style of monk just be like, you know, the like the bard is in EverQuest, you know, super group utility, just a little more restricted.
Right, so the final one is the Shadow of the Dead Vault. Monks that show high levels of agility and perception are usually drugged and dragged in front of a mysterious tribunal of shadowy figures. The monks are given a choice: join the Shadow of the Dead Vault to enhance their already blossoming skills, or leave through the undead catacombs. Those that join are shown great skills and the art of the poison blade. Certain texts even show ways of cheating death and melding into shadows. It is as though it is a tough path, but not as tough as those who do not wish to join. This is interesting. A stealthy,
punchy class.
Yep, and the hint of maybe having some kind of FD by cheating death.
Right. It would give a little more justification behind the feigned death, whereas it's just like, oh, swoon, go away, big baddie. You know, where this is like, you know, they study death, they try to become one with death, and you know, obviously they can mimic it a little bit. So it's like, okay, that you can make enough connections in your own mind to make that feel like it fits. Yeah. Versus just, you know.
So I'm going to go and read off the abilities for this one before we get into some more theory crafting here. Stealthy and trickery used. Use poisons and disease in their attacks. Can shadow jump over short distances and even use illusions to disguise their appearance to blend into societies. Can use chi to generate darkness and silence and possible invisibility if need be. Dark cloth leather armor covers the monk with tiny wisps of smoke tracing around the body from time to time. Their eyes glow faintly in the dark. On their belay vials of, or belly, is what it meant to say. Vials of poison sit tucked away, and each martial weapon carried has its spot on the body.
Mm-hmm.
So
it really sounds like a roguish monk, like which is cool. I mean, it is another. It's kind of stepping on the rogue's toes a bit.
Yeah.
Which is really the only issue I have with it. I like that kind of dark and broody kind of class, so that appeals to me a little bit. It kind of feels a mix between like the monk with a little bit of Dire Lord in it.
yeah, it does a bit.
So I mean, if that were in, I probably, if I was going to try a monk, I'd be going straight for that because it's the one that appeals to me the most.
It's definitely it's one of those veto moments. Wait, I'm going to veto this one, Josh.
You can't fight back. He's not here.
So definitely an interesting approach, but
yeah, I like it in theory.
Yeah.
But it needs a little more definition between a monk and a rogue.
Yeah.
How, I'm not really sure. I'm sure Josh would be able to offer much more
detail.
Much more detail and maybe an alternative thought process. Because, like I said before, I'm not really a monk kind of player. There's nothing about me screams inner peace.
So, let's go and look at some of the martial weapons a monk could use in general. So, cestus, sharp point at the end of a gauntleted fist. Spiked gauntlet, gauntlet with a spiked ball on the end. Butterfly sword, single-edged blade with half-blunt edged side. A dowel, short, single-edged saber-like sword. Nunchuck, short wooden sticks, connected by a chain. Then obviously the bow. Staff reinforced with metal bands. A naginata, whatever that is. Curved blade on the end.
Basically a big blade on a stick.
Ah, okay. Then throwing star and a throwing dagger. So, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, typically in EverQuest style games, the monk has been very against a lot of like piercing or slashing weapons because they feel, I guess it's too messy. I respect that.
Mm.
So I could see the butterfly swords, spike gauntlets, you could probably get away with calling them a blunt weapon. Now, the naginata, how are you pronouncing it? I don't English. I would love to see that stuff in. Don't get me wrong, because I think that given an acrobatic kind of class, the animations that you could pull off with that are absolutely just jaw-dropping. Watch like a Jet Li or Jackie Chan or one of those other style movies, and the things that they do with these weapons is just, you look and be like, if a guy was standing 10 feet from me and he did, like, you win, I'm out. So I'd love to see it, but I don't think that it would ever be justified in an EverQuest-esque universe.
So, after going through these subclass ideas, as we mentioned earlier on at the beginning of the show, or I mentioned more or less, my approach was more like, the title of the subclass screamed faction to me.
Mm-hmm.
So where could we add that twist to it? Because from the description, it definitely invites a very refreshing approach to different possibilities of monk, and I kind of sidetracked from all the faction on that.
I mean, every if you go through just the ones that Josh kind of brainstormed, every one of them, especially with the great description he provided, they really scream a different sector, a different order of monks that are completely separate from their cousins. They could have different outlooks, different types of factions to them. I mean, you could see like one of those death monks not being welcome in certain cities. It would make perfect sense.
What about having, like you mentioned as well, having these monks spread out throughout the world? What if a way to... Maybe this is something you have to unlock as a monk in general. Now, this would be a good way to give the monk himself something to do as a time sink. Some way to advance himself, so he could basically go and study the different monks from these different regions, the monks of Rainfall, King's Reach, or the Order of the Silent Sanctum. And these would kind of be like unlockables that he could basically collect, more or less.
I would like all subclasses to be kind of like that, where you have to do a certain task or find a certain perception trigger or maybe an NPC in the world somewhere that makes sense. So like, I'm going to use that death one because it's just ridiculously easy. You might find him in some long abandoned catacombs of an ancient city that's full of just undead. You know, he kills a lot of them. He gets somewhere deep in there and he finds a monk who's basically just sitting amongst a bunch of dead bodies.
Yeah.
You know, and all of a sudden that triggers a quest to kind of do this thing. And as long as you tell your player that, you know, if you do this, you might not go back.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, then it gives people a reason to be like, well, maybe I don't want to do this, you know, because it's obvious what it's about, because everything around me screams death.
I mean, so, they could even also have, like, some abandoned area, you know, where outcasts are. So maybe from all of these different orders, or these different types of monks, the ones that have been cast out have seeked refuge in this one area, where you could, as a monk, go and you could maybe get a little bit of insight into the individual tellings of these monks. So you kind of get a little bit of a background story, maybe a little bit of an introduction before you go even further and say, well, I want to go and actually hunt down this particular class, subclass, and then later on go and unlock it.
Well, let me just a random thought here. You could do something where you've like was said in chat, maybe you find an item. The item gives you a clue, and it takes you to where this order's, you know, dojo, I guess, where it's located, or their sanctuary is. That doesn't mean you've joined them. It could just be it could be like 2 or 3 steps just to get there. And then when you get there, you know, they basically give you a little rundown of what this is about and what you could expect. And, well, if you want to do it, then they'll send you on a quest, which could be, you know, not necessarily as involved as an epic quest, but it should definitely be longer than a regular quest. Now, the funny part would be if, like, that death sect, you know, if you said no and you found them and you said no, I don't want to join, and they actually sent you through that undead catacomb, basically like, spawn you here, bye.
that would definitely make for some fun for you to go through. I could see that, you know, being something soloable, definitely, but very tough for you to get out of. It's another time sink, a little bit of fun in games for those who want to have that. Something to take away from the normal part of the game. But another funny thing is, wow, thinking back on all this could also be really mean. This could also be one of those hearsay things that have been put out there in the game that, hey, there's this special group of monks of undead or whatever, or, you know, from King's Reach, and it's something just made up. And you go searching, you find clues throughout the game, and because they've done it in EverQuest. You know, there's been lots of hearsay and items found. Everybody's been searching for years and years to figure out, what does this damn item do? It keeps on popping up in some kind of dialogue from an NPC, or shows up in something. That could be the same thing, you know. They could actually go and really meddle with people's minds with this.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to necessarily give you a quest to say, go here.
Yeah.
It could be, you know, oh, you found a note. The note basically gives you a riddle. And then you find another note that looks like this could be related. And using the 2 riddles, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to go over here. And maybe you find something, maybe you don't. Half the time, stuff like that, it's the journey and the fact that you don't have no idea what's going to happen, and that you're kind of like on a treasure hunt that maybe no one else has ever been on. That's the exciting part. Even if you get to the end, there's nothing like, well, this is where a lot of people will get pretty angry. But you got to sit there. A few people will be like, the journey was fun.
Yeah, it's like, bravo, bravo.
Yeah.
I got 3 million new grey hairs.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was to like,
I've gone bald.
even if it was like, say, a riddle to take you to a zone that takes you through a hidden passageway, that's just very visually impressive looking. Like maybe it's a throne room with treasure all over the floor, or just like, I don't know, a room full of crystals or something. Just something that you look and be like, "Wow, that's okay. That was kind of worth it. This place is cool." And then you take your friends there, and they're just like, "Oh my god, how did you find this?"
So we're gonna look at the general monk abilities, and these apply obviously to all out there. So, safe fall. All monks know how to fall great distances without injuring themselves. For each level gained, monks can safe fall an extra meter. Even if they fail their save, the damage taken is reduced by 1% per level. I could get down with that.
Yeah. The only thing that I ask, literally the only thing, especially, I think we're pretty sure that safe fall is going to be in Pantheon. They might have mentioned it for the rogue, I think, or maybe it was Ko when they were in the tower, the reckless magician.
Yeah, he survived. Kilson didn't.
Right. Okay. So there's very good indication that safe fall is going to be in. What I really, really, really want is, you take two people, one has safe fall, one doesn't. The guy who doesn't hits splat. The guy who has safe fall, maybe he rolls.
Yeah.
When he lands. When safe fall is activated, just do a roll when he lands. And that way it lends to a little bit more of the believable, where it's like, okay, he landed. He does what all the parkour guys do. He lands, he kind of does this little hop and then rolls.
Maybe he does a roll, he stands up and he goes, whoa!
Stuck it!
So, chi focus. All monks can focus their chi to either empower their body, counting as magical attacks over level 20. Their bodies also become harder to damage, reducing the damage they take per blow by 1 per 5 levels over 20. Use of martial weapons and unarmed attacks are also increased in speed by a factor of 0.25 per 5 levels over 20. Did you get that?
Yeah, I like it. It's kind of like you have, we'll say you've got three buffs. You could even just say that it takes mana, because we know that some melee classes do have abilities that will rely on mana. So this could be one of them. And out of the 3, you've got one that basically makes you hit harder, one that makes you take less damage, and one that makes your speed. It just basically gives you a small stackable haste.
Yeah.
They obviously wouldn't be super long duration. These would be like your, well, I'm not going to say extra, but they're my oh crap buttons, Everybody's got them, especially tanks. We have if there's macros, we've got our oh crap macro. This seems like one of those buttons where it's like, oh crap, hit it. Maybe we win, maybe we just barely die, And
his last one is study the enemy, which kind of makes sense just from the title. The power of the monk also requires study of its enemy, looking for weaknesses and openings in their attacks. Each time a monk fights a creature, he/she gains a bit of knowledge, i.e. 1 out of 100 points for Grey Orcs. Knowledge can also be gained from books and knowledge. Once the monk has fully studied a mob, the monk gains an extra 10% damage against the mob.
I like it, but not for the reason people would think. I like it because, in my mind, melee DPS is risky DPS. You have to pay attention. You've got to know what you're doing because you are up in the mix. You deal with AEs and everything, whereas a ranged DPSer doesn't have to worry about hardly anything. You worry about patrols behind you, and that's it. I'm cool with that study the enemy ability for monks because they are melee.
Mm.
And if you're dodging AEs and such, you should get a little bit of a bonus to damage over, say, a ranged DPSer.
And it's one of those things that we can tie down to the use of spells or abilities again, like we talked about with the warrior. Basically, learning how to master his weapons, and depending on which weapon he uses most, he's going to have a better damage output, and so forth. And this kind of makes sense with the monk. This is also another time sink, and another way to introduce a new way of growing your strength, your abilities, going forward, with the combination of having to learn about your encounter. So you don't just get a spell and off you go, you hit it and you're done. Basically, over time, you'll gain points, you'll gain knowledge. Once you've studied this creature 100%, you have a complete understanding of that creature. You get an extra bonus. And it also kind of reminds me of the Remember Quest 2, the monster ability that you could get, the monster spell.
Oh, the Master Strike or Master or whatever.
Yeah. But, you know, just for the monk, though, in this case.
Right. I mean, I always thought it was weird how that ability in EverQuest 2 was for everybody.
Mm.
I mean, you know, you take a wizard, right? Why would you ever use that thing? It just doesn't make sense. A fireball doesn't need you to be vulnerable. You know, you don't have to know their anatomy in order to immolate them to death.
Yeah.
But I could see that with melee characters a little more. The monk makes sense. The rogue makes sense. You know, the warrior's not so much worried about the weakness. They're more worried about smashing someone's face in.
Exactly. They're worried about basically having the knowledge over their weapons to do the most efficient damage and smash the crap out of this beast. They're not worried about, you know, having an extra ability strike or, you know, 10% bonus. They don't care about that.
Right. To me, like the rogue and the monk especially are what I call finesse classes, because they really should project a little bit of finesse in their gameplay. Because they're both very, very skilled, or they should be very, very skilled to be what they are.
Exactly. You know, these should be one of those classes where it's not really easy to master. It's not a class you just take on and off you go and you do your thing and you just run, FD, stand up, run, FD, stand up, run, FD, stand up. Anybody can do that.
Right.
You know, the monk should feel like it requires a certain level of understanding and time to understand and master. The same goes with, like you said, with the rogue. Another class that requires a bit of knowledge and to be honest, the bard as well. The use of the instruments. And when we get into that discussion, that's going to be so much fun. But anyway, let's go and move on, because we only have 2 more things to talk about, and I'm sure Josh left the rest out for a future discussion. So this will be the Monk Part 1, and we'll have definitely a Part 2, where we'll talk about the other ones, and whatever Josh wants to add to it, maybe he can go back and contemplate some of the things that we said.
Let's say, if we could probably leave these specifics for another show if we really wanted to.
Maybe we could do. So we could basically, what we'll do is, actually, we'll leave these out. Basically, next time when Josh is there, we'll carry on with this discussion where we look at what their abilities are.
More in depth.
More in depth, what their abilities are. And Josh can also contemplate on what we talked about and add some to the discussion. So what we'll do now is, Shy, anything in chat people want to ask or have a say on, ideas?
Well, we did.
Tell
we
me
had
where to go.
Oh, we had that every time.
Every day.
No.
What I missed?
I know, same thing.
Oh, she was saying questions. I was like, or someone that wants to tell me where to go.
Oh, right, okay.
I had 3 questions, but Lexer stole one from me and went ahead and answered it in chat anyway and took my fun away. So we only have 2.
I've never stole anyone's fun before.
Of course not. But these are from Dusk Runner, and they'd like to know First off, what do you think about monks having a weight limit? Should there be a positive reinforcement mechanic for being under the weight limit, as in increased dodge rating, etc.?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. I mean, I know... Well, I didn't play monks. I knew a lot of people who played monks in EverQuest. And they loved the whole weight battle, I guess we'll call it. But I always felt that it was kind of weird that if you were really, really good at reducing your weight, you never got a benefit. I mean, I can understand there being like a range where you're normal, kind of, and then all of a sudden you go too high or too heavy and get penalties. But if you're too low, or if you're really, really low, you should get a benefit, in my mind.
I'd actually like to take a different approach to this whole weight loss and weight gain, especially towards the monk, because if there's one class out there that would technically have no problem with extra weight, it would be the disciplined monk.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be something they would have to learn over time. We've seen monks hang weights off of their bodies and body parts you will not believe, and it's just crazy. I see something like that I would love to see something toward that in an MMO, where it's an additional feature that you could have, where the more you master your class and understand and everything, so you could have maybe a little side game put in what you could do on and off your time when you're not, grouping or raiding or, doing other important stuff. You can go in, just mess around with your class instead of going faction grinding for the 100th time in that stupid zone or whatever to grab whatever pieces you want, bone fragments and all that. You can actually go to your class trainer and maybe study some way to balance your body and, feel no pain, feel no weight, kind of a weightless effect. So, meaning that you could technically carry more without having that.
Right, or it would extend those ranges, basically.
Yeah, I'd like to see something like that. To be honest, if it were an option, be what I would.
Mm-hmm.
And the second question. Also by Duskrunner, monks are masters of meditation. Could it be something that influences their meditation in comparison to other classes?
What I would actually love to see is the monk still get the meditation skill, a la EverQuest, only the meditation puts them in a state of, calm, which gives them a buff.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a short duration buff, so that there's a reason for them to meditate after a couple fights, so that they keep it going. To me, it fits, but I could see a couple people being like, "Oh God, I don't want to have to med as a freaking monk."
I'm in the middle with this one again. Another way to time sync and add a little bit of flavor and twist to the whole aspect of the approach. You can even add benefits to this as well. The more you meditate, for instance, the more you become one with your body and soul. And with that, you get a little benefit. You might have a shorter recast or a minor reduction on the mana that you use for your abilities as a balance out, as a reward for becoming one with your body and soul.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another thing that you would have to train, and the reward is obviously going to be very minimal. It could also be done towards a way of fluff items per se, a passive ability of sorts maybe. So that's how I would most probably like to look at that one. So yeah, anything else?
No,
that was it.
That was it.
The question I had answered pertained to monks being main tanks. They've never been main tanks in my mind. Granted, there are some who can. There always was a couple monks in EverQuest 1 that could walk up and tank the group stuff, because their DPS would hold threat. But the problem with that is that it's not that reliable. Yeah. Because if If the wizard nuke crits and pulls it off, well, that wizard is, for lack of a better word, boned.
Well, that's where...
Whereas with an actual proper tank, they have a chance to kind of snap that aggro off.
But doesn't challenge come with that then? You know, isn't that another way to add a twist to the game? Not necessarily saying that the monk should be able to tank, and be a main tank. But when I look back at EverQuest 2, for instance, the original game and the original concept behind the tanking in EverQuest 2 was designed for all of those tank classes to be able to tank, or have to tank, in certain raid zones. In most of the raid zones, especially in the early days of EverQuest 2, you had all different kinds of mob in there. You had mobs that had arcane, who had poison, who had physical, who had speed. So you would have a berserker, a guardian, a paladin, a shadow knight, a bruiser, a monk, or whatever, have to tank those specific mobs. But we all became lazy and, you know, took the easy route and went guardian, and that was it. I can see this adding to the challenge where you could possibly have your monk tank, but it would obviously require a lot. They would have to have a complete understanding of their body and soul, and have all these abilities unlocked and whatnot, and have a true understanding to the character. And it would come down to us as a group as well.
Right.
But, you know, that wizard that's just going to go and over nuke, expect to die. You know, the monk will not be able to pull him off for you. And that's where the challenge comes in. So instead of going in there and just DPSing the mobs, this is more of a controlled fight.
Right.
And,
I mean, don't get me wrong. We know monks in Pantheon are gonna have the ability to off tank. We know that for a fact because it has been said in a live stream. Subject to change, possibly. But I mean, the thing is, let the monk do what the monk does best. Let him hit things, make them hurt. You know?
And it looks like, you know, they've gone that route though with Pantheon as well. When you look at the monk, I see him as a more hittable DPSer.
Yeah, it's a DPS that can actually take care of himself.
Take one or two for the group. Exactly.
Right. Now, if a mob's at 10% or 15 or maybe even 50%, and the warrior goes down, well, if the monk's got abilities that can increase the survivability, of course it makes sense that they step up and tank it.
Yep.
Versus the cleric or the wizard. You know, it makes sense. So yeah, they should have a little bit of, oh God, I need to save my group. But it shouldn't be like, hey guys, watch me hit 3 buttons and now I'm invincible. Yeah.
So, coming to the end of the show, we'll basically leave this one open for a second discussion with Josh and get some more feedback from him, and obviously we can add to this one. Before we end, a few things I do want to say. We're currently working on getting the show planned for the rest of the year. We have roughly about 17, 18 shows to still plan out. We would love to have people come onto the show, do player interviews with us, or, you know, come onto some of the discussions that we have. Hopefully within the next 2 weeks we will have all those shows planned for the rest of the year. And we'll put those out for you guys in a Google Doc and obviously on the website for you to have a look at. But if anybody's in chat that wants to come on, do a player interview with us, sit down and talk Pantheon and introduce yourself to the community.
Give us your thoughts on your class of choice.
Yep. And please reach out to us, either on Twitter or on Discord. Is Zathras here?
I
do not believe so.
Can you toss in the link for Discord, Lex?
I will do just that.
So, what's coming up in the next couple of weeks? Next week we'll be talking about expansion cycles, content versus frequency, more content slower or less faster, content patches, and cost to players. The week after that we'll be talking about death penalty and corpse runs, penalty versus time constraint.
can't they see all that stuff down in the panel now?
They can as
On the
well.
schedule?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can see that also down on the panel. See? Something that I completely just went out of my head. And then after that, we'll be talking about the newsletter and packs. What was talked about there. We'll have Basgrim with us as well to chit-chat about that. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Love me some bias.
So with that, people,
Take a bite out of him.
thanks for joining us. It was great having you here. And we will see you all next Friday. Have a great weekend, and thanks for watching.
I won't be here.
Yeah, we won't have... Wait, you won't be here? When?
I'm gone next week.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Surprise!
Surprise!
I didn't know that. I thought in May.
No, I'm gone most of May, but I'm also gone next week.
Oh, okay. And he's missing the topic that he actually wanted to do. So you better give us some freaking content to talk about.
Yes, I will write up notes.
Alright then, guys. Take care.
See you.
Have a good one. Bye.